Hi, this is John Wren. This is the Startup Show. And today we're talking about action class and practical politics and the new caucus clubs. So we're here each Friday from noon to 12:30. A little early today. There's an event I'm attending that is going to interfere. So we're going to put it out a little bit early, and then people that come here at noon will be watching it or anytime thereafter by recording. If you want to be on a guest here on the show with me, it's from the webcam on your computer. And if you'd like to do that next week with me, especially if you disagree with anything I'm saying, I'd love to have you. Give me a call Monday or Tuesday at 303-861-1447. We are sponsored by the Small Business Chamber of Commerce, Inc., and we are an attempt to strengthen the grassroots in business and politics through education. And we have a new program we're starting called Caucus Clubs. I'm going to talk to you about that at the very end of the show today. We may be a little shorter than 30 minutes today. We'll see what happens. But we're also going to start doing action class and practical politics. And people might think that's a little bit not in the realm of a chamber of commerce. Well, the reason the caucus used to work so well is the chambers made it their responsibility to make sure that their members understood the caucus system and how it worked and had them participating. And for some reason, especially the Denver Metro Chamber is trying to kill the caucus, switch to a presidential primary, which we know kills the caucus. We've tried it here in Denver before. Now, I'm wearing two hats now. I'm the founder and the president of the Small Business Chamber of Commerce, Inc. We try to cooperate with local chambers to help them give more real help to startups and small businesses. And I also am the registered agent for something called Save the Caucus, a Colorado political committee that is, an outward and visible sign of this is a labor of love for me. The caucus is something I encountered right after graduate school. I just had the precinct committee person hand it to me, the job of precinct committee person. And it was in a well-organized precinct. And one of my neighbors just came across doing block work. Lyle Lindesmith had done this action class and practical politics for years for all kinds of groups, nonpartisan. And he just did an ongoing training program on how to participate in the caucus system. In addition, Chambers of Commerce did it, and also the League of Women Voters used to do a lot more with civic education and how our Colorado system works. And without those education efforts, the Colorado caucus has fallen on hard times. In 2002, we fought Amendment 29, which would have put the Colorado caucus out of its misery back then. It had grown so weak that probably that should have been done. I think Brett Bridges probably was doing us a favor to make us focus on it and decide, do we want it or not? Well, people in Colorado then had seen the Colorado caucus pre-presidential primary. They're talking about 108, 107 as if these kinds of things haven't been talked about before. Well, the presidential primary has actually been tried in Colorado, and we know from that experience that it kills the caucus. And why does that matter? Because the Colorado caucus is the best chance the average ordinary person has of serving in elected public office. And if you participated March 1st, you saw it at its worst. Both state chairs were on public TV the weekend before calling for the end of the caucus system, and then they were doing everything they could to make it a miserable experience. That was just clear. Now, they've edited that part of the tape out on PBS, so we're going to try to get that restored. But definitely they were on TV saying the caucus system is antiquated and old. We need to get rid of it. Let's switch to a presidential primary. Preserve it for other things. They were saying, let's get rid of it all. That's what they wanted to do at that time. Then the proposition ended up being split, 107, 108, and I think it's kind of a strategic decision on how they're campaigning for it, is they want to create the illusion that they're for the caucus by voting against this crazy 107 or 108. 98 and 140 were the initiative numbers. Then they switched the numbers, and the high number became the low number and vice versa. So and sometimes they, I think, intentionally try to cause as much confusion as they can. So just vote no. If you're the slightest bit confused about anything that's on the ballot, either don't vote at all or vote no. You can skip it, just not vote. Although if it's confusing to you, it's probably something that needs to be defeated. So especially 107, 108, we urge you to vote no. And if you do, then we'll be, now the Senate, Senator Grantham and others have gone around the state and gathered information. I'm sure this will be taken up hopefully early on in the session this time. Last 2 years in a row, they've brought these caucus killing legislation out at the very last minute, and it's not fostered thoughtful discussion. There probably are things that could be done to improve the Colorado caucus, and we need some thoughtful discussion of those things. So, but we always have to play the cards that we're dealt. And this action class in practical politics uses material from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, 8 booklets that address a variety of topics: the political party organization, the political precinct, the political campaign, political clubs, the political leaders' problems, political meetings, and businessmen in politics, because this did have an audience of small business owners. And if the Denver Chamber was doing the job they used to do, teaching this material, instead of, it's just outrageous that they're the ones that are leading the charge to try to kill the caucus. If I was a member of the Denver Chamber of Commerce, I would be looking for a new executive director, because for them to get that far out on it, I just don't understand. Now, I know they probably are responding to some big businesses. DaVita and Kent 30, if you go to University of Denver's website, du.edu, search on Voices of Experience, and Kent 30, TIRTY, I believe it is. You can see 1 hour of him talking about what he's done at DaVita. And he's got an unusual approach to management. Well, I wish 2 years ago, instead of starting his campaign against the caucus, he had started a campaign to try to help precinct people cooperate in their neighborhood, because a good neighborhood leads to good caucuses. In the news today is George Bush's letter to Bill Clinton that he left in the Oval Office. And it's very touching. I don't think anybody could read it and not have a tear come to your eye. But Bush is wishing Clinton well. And that's the spirit that has built America. We have these contests, but then we all come together, and representatives represent all the people, not just their particular party. Yes, they have to, if you're a Republican, you're going to be voting a little bit differently than if you're a Democrat. Now, my libertarian friends and all third-party candidates, really, whatever party it is, they always say, well, there's not that much difference between the Republicans and the Democrats. And that's true. It's a process that competes for the majority of voters, so it's going to move towards the center. People say that it's a radicalizing process. It's actually not. What's radicalizing is having something organized to come in and try and control the party. And, the political parties, the purpose is to select party leadership, delegates, and representatives. Delegates to vote on the representatives, but, you have the representatives in mind, but you don't go in and vote directly on the representative. Even for president, the Republicans have always had this tradition of no straw poll. And the reason for that is because you want to meet with the people in the precinct caucus, hear what they have to say about the candidates, but you vote for them because their purpose then is to go on and eventually to the national convention. Delegates go and make a final decision based on full information. You want them to represent you face to face. Kurt Vonnegut wrote an essay one time about sitting backstage. Kurt Vonnegut, the science fiction writer, is a terrific writer. And he's sitting backstage to go on and give a talk, and he's wondering, why do these people pay money to come and hear me when they can pick up my book, read it, and see in depth what I have to say? And then it occurred to him that we can't really take the measure of a person unless we're face to face with them, maybe even in an auditorium, but at least you have the person there in the room with you, and you can tell things about a person face to face that you just can't tell over TV or other mass media. And so we've had this system that's provided for representatives going and representing us in the beginning because there was too little information. Now today, it's because we're flooded with information, a lot of it misinformation. And by delegates going and making a final decision at the convention, then things can be much different in a representative system. In 2002, we campaigned for Save the Caucus back then, different than Save the Caucus today. Save the Caucus back then in 2002, I was one of the co-founders, and we beat Amendment 29, 14, what was it, 60%, 40%, despite being outspent 1,400 to 1. And the reason for that is a lot of people had gone to the caucus in the good old days, the times when I was made precinct committee person, given this fully organized precinct. Now, fully organized precinct, and that's what they talk about with this U.S. Chamber material, is how do you organize a precinct? But you have block workers. So the committee person doesn't do all the work themselves, but each block, each apartment building has somebody on the team. And then the team meets sometimes on a monthly basis and talks about who's moved into the neighborhood, what's changed, stays in touch. Now, I bet there's not more than a handful of these fully organized precincts left in Colorado, because what's happened is the emphasis has been put on campaigns. And part of this is legislative. They've made it much more difficult to support a political party than it is a candidate. You can, so that's a long story, but you have to play the cards that you're dealt. And so the action class in practical politics is a 90-minute look at these kinds of issues. What are our American values? How does the Colorado caucus system work today? Not, what are we going to do in the future to improve it necessarily? That's a separate conversation. And how do you use it to either run for political office yourself or help other good people get elected? Now, the key is that it's a long distance race. And we're looking at the 2018 caucus and what we can do to improve it. And it's not going to all happen then. 2020, we'll have another presidential race. Every 2 years, there's a statewide civics lesson. And we're going to be forming, and not exactly that much. It's not that we're going to form. We want to try to inspire people in their own neighborhood to start something that you could call a caucus club. You may not want to call it a caucus club, and have some sort of activity on a monthly basis that pulls the neighborhood together, both Republicans and Democrats. Good neighborhoods have good caucuses, and we have neighborhoods that are falling apart. Robert Putnam wrote a book called Bowling Alone 20 years ago or so, and he saw the problem then that we were becoming more and more isolated, and now we're bearing the poison fruit from that isolation. And many of us think that the last, but the best hope of pulling neighborhoods back together again is our Colorado caucus. Now, it's not Colorado caucuses. It's comprised of 6,000 meetings across the state. There's 3,000 precincts, the Republicans, the Democrats, any other major party, perhaps the Libertarians become a major party and they have enough people to have caucuses, that would be great. But the major parties have these meetings and elect delegates to nominating assemblies and start the process of electing party leadership, their own party leadership, precinct committee people. Then the torch is passed right there. And it's getting people together face to face and having a discussion. Now, why trade that for just watching ads and walking into a voting booth and pulling a lever or writing it down on a paper? You know, that is not what made this country great. Dwight D. Eisenhower said that in our system of government back then in 1954 or so, you know, in our system of government, this caucus system really, when it was going well in most of the country, but in our system of government, Dwight Eisenhower said, politics must be the part-time occupation of every citizen. Now, for many citizens, it's a very, very part-time job. And just voting is maybe all they can do, and that's wonderful. And you vote in the general election, and if you want to affiliate with a party, vote in the primary election. But you don't have to affiliate. You might want to stay unaffiliated, because one little known fact is if you stay unaffiliated in Colorado, when the primary comes, you can vote in either primary. It's about 15 seconds on the computer to change to Republican or Democratic, and you can then vote in that primary election and then change back to unaffiliated. If you're a Republican or a Democrat, they want you to wait 30 days after you change. Now, I think that's a good rule because, you know, someone that's been affiliated for 30 days is of a different, you know, there's not going to be as much, if your party has no chance of winning at the last minute, you could have a massive shift and just really foul up the primary election for the other party. And don't think things like that aren't done. Yes, they are. Because we're dealing with human beings, and, you know, I think most people have good motivation, but, you know, sometimes we get a little confused in our zeal to be helpful and end up doing things that we think that the end justifies the means. And so some crazy things can happen. That's why rules are important. And we have political rules that try to keep things in bounds that we try to follow. And if we get too far out of bounds, we're reminded that that's not how we do it here. And I think the system is wonderful. The problem is we've had very poor leadership in both political parties, especially for this last caucus, March 1st. And if you went to that caucus, you're probably looking at me right now, if you're still watching, and thinking this man's out of his mind. That was chaos, and it was, because it had very poor leadership, but the system works. So you've gone, and, you know, the main way to learn this is to go to one, just show up and watch. And that's what you've done if you saw the chaos. Now, in 2018, go and participate. Be willing to be the precinct committee person. And then in that third one, bring somebody with you and teach them how the system works. And then you yourself go on to district captain or maybe run for office. But don't do it the first time you've gone to a caucus. Go to the caucus, watch, go to the caucus, lead, then go to the caucus and train and move on yourself, either then or maybe the next time around. Politics is a long distance race. In our instant gratification society, that's hard for people to appreciate. These silly ads that are being run by the supporters of 107 and 108 look like they belong on Saturday morning TV where the kids watch the cartoons. And it's just pathetic. There are these kids playing on the playground. Then they take those same values to the caucus. Really? That's not fair. You know, I can just visualize the bully that won't participate with either group, but he wants to go and just fit in at both of their parties. You know, we don't do that socially with kids. People come together, tribes. There are books now talking about how do we do this more, get back together and form the tribes that we used to have. Well, one way is with the precinct caucus. And it does, you know, the kid moving in does need some help. And that's why we're forming caucus clubs. You know, at the service of both parties, we want to organize a communications and educational network that will welcome newcomers to the neighborhood when they move in, make sure they know who their precinct committee people are. They know about local publications, maybe local performing arts groups. And they also have civic education events so that the people that are new to Colorado or new to Colorado politics understand how the process works and can make a decision about whether they want to go or not. Now, people seem to get worried about, well, everybody can't go. In the military, maybe they can't go and participate in the caucus. You have kids, whatever, you school, and that's true. But the precinct caucus is not the primary election. It's how names get put on the primary ballot, and then everybody votes. That's where we want participation, you know, in the primary election. But as far as putting people onto the ballot, we want the competition between the two parties or three parties or however many parties, because that competition improves the representation and it makes them pay attention to their constituency. But we need to start in a more powerful way coming together after the election and remembering that we are one neighborhood, you know, we're one state, we're one country, e pluribus unum, and many there are is strength, and that there is a tool that we have in place here in Colorado. Now, there's a book, Why Iowa, written by 3 political science professors, and they have a suggestion that I think will eventually be adopted. In the chaos, they're going to be looking for things to improve. Now, what we're looking at today is what happens when it's presidential primary making the picks. You end up with 2 candidates nobody wants. That's the presidential primary. Caucus system, you have a more thorough vetting, and you didn't see either one of the presidential candidates that are the so-called nominees now, and they're ones we have to vote on for the 2 parties. These come out of the presidential primary that's now replaced caucus nearly everywhere, because you don't have the same thorough vetting. And what these, the Why Iowa suggests is that there be a caucus period where Iowa and Colorado and the other caucus states, there's still a handful, and maybe we need a couple more, but they have a caucus, and then there's a national primary. Why spread the primary out? Let's have it all over, and then we can shorten it up, and we don't have to endure this TV phenomena of the campaign lasting for a couple of years this time around. So there'll be changes made at the national levels, and there should be. Here in Colorado, we have what works. We need to preserve and protect it. And the people that have had the responsibility of preserving, protecting, educating have tried to kill it. I mean, let's recognize the fact they tried to abort the system that they were put in charge of. And Steve House and Rick Palazzo ought to be run out of their respective parties unless they repent and make amends. And maybe they're in the process of doing it. They're now saying they're for the caucus. Well, if that's really true, they need to come out strongly against the presidential primary before this election. And they have not done that, because the presidential primary kills the caucus. We know, because that's happened here in Colorado. Well, watch for the action class in practical politics. We have a leadership group that's meeting now for the caucus clubs. If you'd like to participate in that, we'd love to have you. It's 4:30 each Friday afternoon. It's a joint meeting with the Idea Cafe Startup Workshop. At the time being, we meet at the LoDo Panera Bread Market and 16th. You can find out more on meetup.com/Colorado-caucus or caucus clubs. Caucus-clubs is our meetup group. We also have a website, cocaucus.org, that's serving for, right now, the Save the Caucus Committee. It's a Colorado political committee. I'm a registered agent. Scott Shires is a registered agent. 1881 Bucktail Boulevard, number 501, Denver 80210. And that website address is cocaucus.org. You can call us at 303-861-1447. Well, that's the action class in practical politics. You can watch for announcements of that in the next few days. The caucus clubs, we sent out a media release yesterday. We're hoping gets picked up. You can see that media release on our website, cocaucus.org, and also on smallbizchamber.org. So this is going to be an educational effort. It's not going to endorse issues or candidates, except for any issue that affects the Colorado caucus. We expect the legislature will be picking up this question and looking for ways to improve the caucus. That's one of the things we'll talk about at the steering committee this afternoon. So feel free to join us. If you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to give me a call. This is John Wren. We're here each Friday for the Startup Show to talk about how do you get started. And today we're talking about starting, maybe for you, a political career. Best way to do that, get involved with us with Save the Caucus. Get involved in your own neighborhood caucus. Maybe start a caucus club or something else. We're going to have ideas for building that caucus club and monthly activities. Easy to put on, but have a very powerful effect. One of the first ones we're going to recommend is something called an alarm clock party. I'll tell you more about that next week. We're here each Friday at noon, and whatever way brought you here, you know, look for us. We're a YouTube live event now and a Google Plus Hangout, and I'm getting used to working the equipment. You know, I think this is such a powerful tool, and I appreciate the opportunity Google's giving us to connect with one another. But now we need to take, you know, outward actions that are going to strengthen our own neighborhoods. And let's share about how we're doing that. And maybe we'll start that process here next week. If you'd like to be on the show with me and talk about your neighborhood and talk about the Colorado Caucus, especially if you disagree with what I said today, give me a call Monday or Tuesday, 303-861-1447. And we'll have you on the show with us right from in front of your computer with a webcam. And if you don't know about that, call me and I'll tell you more. So 303-861-1447 on Monday or Tuesday. And this afternoon for the steering committee for the new caucus clubs at the LoDo Panera, 16th and Market. Well, until next week, this is John Wren reminding you and myself, this life is very short. So let's go get started. Thanks for watching.